Animation is an art form as old as time itself. Hence, one of the first instances of it centered around a dinosaur. It's something that we've seen take on so many different forms for as long as it's existed. From traditional 2D drawings to technology pushing 3D, to inventive meshes of both, to practically built models. It's also something we're at risk of seeing turn into an endless sea of soulless artificially generated sludge that as technology improves will make it impossible to know what little of it left was made by actual human beings. A future that at this point in time I can only see being stopped if enough people take it upon themselves to track down whatever computers are running this shit and smash them until they are completely fucking atomized. All the while soy boy tech bros look on in horror, not knowing what to do because let's be real, these guys are not gonna put up a fight. Although I can't imagine a solution like that would exactly be legal, so I'm obligated to tell you not to do that. Something I'm not obligated to tell you though is that a simple Google search reveals that OpenAI is headquartered at 3180 18th Street in San Francisco, California. You know, just some food for thought, but I digress. Animation is an art form that never fails to astonish me with the fact they are able to pull it off. Whenever a new animated film or show comes out, I'm always trying to wrap my head around the level of talent that went into it. The number of months or even years it must have taken to get it finished. The countless amount of people who had to be on the same page just to pull off one unique vision. With that said though, not all of it is great. Some of it in fact is kind of shit. And I'm not just talking about those corporate cash grabs like the Emoji Movie who, to be fair, still look like a ton of money was put into them. I'm talking about that stuff that was made in some warehouse which found its way into the Walmart bargain bin. I think every 2000s kid had a parent or grandparent who bought them one of these discs. I know I did. Anybody remember The Reef? Where are my fellow reefers at?
Curse you, star-crossed destiny!
Pretty much all of these were straight-to-DVD crap that would be lucky if Netflix needed to pad out their library. It's all stuff too that, even if people remember them as they get older, just disregard them as mindless entertainment for their dumb child brains. This makes it especially odd when something like them manages not only to get a theatrical release, but even a cult following years after its initial run. The film in question? Hoodwinked. One of the very first independently funded animated movies, Hoodwinked was made during that Shrek era of warping fairy tales to have a modern edge. In this case, the story of Red Riding Hood retold as a whodunit mystery. It was made on a shoestring budget by a team who had to learn 3D animation as they worked on it. And boy does it show. Granted, there is stuff out there that looks far, far worse, but either way, this is no Pixar or DreamWorks. Except for DreamWorks that one time. And just recently, now that I think about it. Behind that rough exterior though, this movie's plot is actually really good. Well, I mean, it's pretty good. It's definitely got a few rough patches, but man, the fact that there are people who have fond memories of something that looks like this, it must have done something right. I've always been fascinated by the fact that a production like this could turn out a pretty worthwhile end product. It makes it worth talking about, and I'm here to do exactly that. So without any further ado, here's Hoodwinked. The film opens up with Red Riding Hood arriving at her grandmother's house checking in on her. However, she notices something off about Granny, especially her very Joe Swanson-y sounding voice.
What big eyes you have.
Well, we just kind of sit around here and talk about how big I'm getting.
So I'm pretty sure you know the drill. Red Riding Hood visits her grandma, the big bad wolf disguises himself as her, the woodsman bursts in, Granny is tied up this time around as opposed to being eaten, but other than that, you know how it goes. The jig is up and all hell breaks loose, before we cut to the title. Sometime later, Granny's house is now an active crime scene. We hear talk of an elusive criminal known only as the Goody Bandit, who the police believe is tied to the incident at hand and might be one of the four inside. Their grizzly bear police chief is ready to take them all in, but is quickly halted by the arrival of the frogman, Nicky Flippers. How is he qualified to interfere in an active crime scene? Don't know, but he's British and wears a nice suit. I'm pretty sure he knows what he's doing. Flippers only sees it right to give these four a chance to defend themselves by explaining what happened to each of them up until that point. This is where you realize how the plot of this movie is going to play out. You see, Hoodwinked isn't a film with a simple beginning, middle, and end. What you have here is more a broken up narrative in which events are retold and often given new context based on who's talking. I remember when I first watched this movie as a kid, and this blew my mind. I had never seen a movie do this sort of thing before. You'll see what I'm talking about as I go along. To give her side of things first is Red, who starts off saying she began her day delivering goodies for her granny's renowned bakery, all the while singing a song about wanting more out of her simple, mundane life. Yeah, did I forget to mention this is a musical? In fact, not only is it a musical, it's a shitty musical. Not to say the songs themselves are bad, I actually like them, but there's only like 3 of them in the entire movie. 2 while Red is giving her alibi and 1 in the climax. Like, can you even call it a musical at that point? I also don't really count the Schnitzel song halfway through because that's more of a throwaway gag if anything. The song that punk rock gopher sings too is mostly just a background thing they cut in front of once or twice. Although as background songs go, it is awesome.
You can take the critter out of the tree, but you can't take the tree out of the tree critter's needs.
Anyway, Red gives more insight on the so-called Goody Bandit, and how they've put bakers out of business all over the forest. One of the many casualties being Red's non-suspicious bunny friend Boingo, whose boss had to close down shop. Red knows that because Granny's bakery is so renowned, it puts an especially big target on the 2 of them. After an attempted break-in of the shop, Red decides the only place their baking secrets will be safe is back with her granny up the mountain. So, quick side note. Does Red live by herself? I mean, she might have some parents off screen, but the fact that there's this whole subplot of Red being restrained by her overprotective grandma implies that Granny is her guardian. But the thing is, Granny also tells her she doesn't want her coming over, which tells me they don't live together. Ignoring the questionable child protection laws this implies, why is Red so uptight about her granny keeping her down? I feel like as long as they stay in touch over the phone, Red could get away with so much stuff under her nose. I don't know, this is kind of just something that never made sense to me growing up. Red sneaks the recipe book in her basket and takes a cable car to Granny's house. Boingo's there too.
Forest can be a dangerous place for a little guy like me. With my cute little, look at me, I'm fuzzy and, hey, you deliver up this far?
Well, not usually. But I was thinking about what you told me earlier.
Some trees thankfully slow her fall and Red finds herself in the middle of the woods, where she meets a familiar face. Well, I mean, familiar to us. Technically, this is the first time she's seeing him. Wolf tries making awkward small talk, very obviously trying to coax Red into giving him her basket. Red is hesitant though, and thus Wolf needs to resort to some more assertive methods to get it. A chase ensues, but luckily Red is able to lure him into a nearby river where he drifts away. With the cable car no longer an option, Red now has to find another way to Granny's house. She comes across an old mining shack where she hopes to get help from a singing goat. This goat is the best character in the movie. He tells Red he has this curse where he can't say anything without singing it, to where he now lives secluded from everyone else. The thing is though, this curse is actually a blessing in disguise. He sings this song about how he's been able to survive on the mountain thanks to his collection of interchangeable horns. It is the single best song in the movie, to which I know there isn't much competition, but still. There is so much passion at every word he says, like, just listen to him go.
When you're on the mountain, there's lots to be feared. That's why this here old mountain goats prepare.
During a cart ride to Granny's house, Red and the goat outrun an avalanche just before facing a destroyed track in front of them. As the minecart goes hurtling in the air, Red gets a vision of her granny, who tells her to defy the laws of physics and use her hood as a makeshift glider. The goat makes it out just as well. He might have only had 5 minutes of screen time, but damn it did he make them count. Godspeed. At last, Red makes it to Granny's house, and her story catches up to the present. Despite her accounts pointing to Wolf being the Goody Bandit, they can't be too hasty. They bring him in to get his side of the story, to which Flippers seems to recognize him.
Wait a minute, Flippers. You saying this guy's a cop?
Worse, he's a reporter.
Oh, what?
And I've got the real story.
As it turns out, Wolf is actually an investigative journalist who's been on the hunt for the Goody Bandit, snooping in on everybody from poorly rendered porcupines to minimum wage furries.
Your boss, Kenny.
You mean Earl?
Well, that's what Earl said. He said, Ken, hey, come down here, and so, here I am.
Also, in a world of talking animals, is this like blackface or something? The reason he's been chasing Red all day is actually because he suspects her regular delivery runs as a front for transporting stolen recipes. We also discover that Wolf has a partner, a fast-talking squirrel named Twitchy, who, fun fact, is the sped-up voice of the film's director, Corey Edwards.
I got a Burley and I got the gear. I was watching the girl like you told me to, the girl in the red hood.
I gotta talk about this squirrel real quick. Twitchy is one of those characters, you know? Those tiny creatures with high-pitched voices that just exist for kids to buy plushies of. We've all seen them and we all hate them for how annoying they are. Weirdly though, I actually don't hate Twitchy, and yet for the longest time I couldn't understand why. I mean, listen to this thing.
She went past the porcupines and the redbird tree and the guy with the long beard, and now she's up the creek and she sings everywhere she goes. She's like, la 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 la.
I should be finding this little shit unbearable. I used to think I was just blinded by nostalgia, But then I remembered what they did to him in Hoodwinked 2. You see, one of the defining aspects of Twitchy's voice in this movie is the speed of it. It's literally acknowledged in the plot and is even something the characters end up having to slow down a recording of just to understand it.
The criminal you're looking for cannot be found at the bottom of the mountain.
The sequel did away with this completely. He just has a high-pitched voice there. They even do that same slowing down of his voice there too, and it doesn't even make sense because he's already talking at a normal speed.
I'm going in right now, right now.
I am going in.
This one single change to how Twitchy talked somehow made him unbearable to listen to. That's when I realized Twitchy's fast way of talking is why I don't mind his voice here. The fact that it's hard to understand actually makes it kind of fun trying to decipher what he's saying. Without it, Twitchy would just be an annoying high-pitched voice. Anyway, Wolf and Twitchy are seen listening in on Red's cable car from below, and just like earlier, she falls out. It's revealed that Wolf didn't actually lash out at her before. He was just interrogating her when Twitchy cut off the circulation in his tail. I gotta say, I really like how they don't just reuse the same footage from when he was talking to Red earlier. Everything is much more brightly lit this time around. It makes the whole scene a lot less ominous than before, which makes sense because of what we know about Wolf now. It's a small detail, but it really drives home this idea that everyone here are seeing things differently. Once again, Wolf tries chasing Red only to end up drifting down the river, to where this time we see him and Twitchy meet back up. Boingo's there too.
Is there some kind of shindig? Because I'm great at parties. Watch me pull myself out of a hat.
The only way the two are gonna find her now is by getting to Granny's house before her. They make their way to the same tracks Red and the goat were on and snag themselves an ongoing minecart. One that for some reason has a bunch of unattended explosives inside.
Bean on meat cane. Must be Italian.
They end up destroying the tracks behind them, explaining what happened earlier when Red and the goat flew off. We even get a glimpse of the two. Finally, they arrive at Granny's house and Wolf puts on a conveniently placed Granny costume to disguise himself. Once again, Wolf's story catches up with the present. However, there's a hole that the cops are quick to point out.
You said the old lady was already tied up? How did that happen?
I don't know. Maybe to make herself look innocent. I just write the news, Chief. I don't make it.
As shady as that answer is, though, Twitchy gives Flippers some photos that legitimize his story, at least enough not to convict him right away. Up next is the Woodsman, aka a fucking atrocity of a character model. I mean, look at this guy. Those Michelin man-ass arms, his crazy eyes, that beard that looks like if you shaved it you would just see a really long pointy chin, like Donkey Kong's skull. If there was any character to suffer from this film's budget, it's him. Now I'm just gonna say it up front. The story this guy gives is the weakest of the four. As it turns out, the Woodsman, whose real name is Kirk, isn't a woodsman at all. He's a food truck driver who aspires to be an actor. Earlier that day, he botched an audition playing Paul Bunyan in a foot cream commercial, because those two things just go hand in hand. To make things worse, his truck was ransacked while luring ugly children into the woods with promises of sweets, putting his only job on the line. Boingo's there too.
Maybe someday somebody will open up a great big goodie shop and we can all work for that little guy.
Things start to look up though when Kirk gets a call from the audition director who's willing to give him another shot. This time, he needs to truly know what it feels like to be a woodsman if he wants to get into character, and thus proceeds to go on a violent rampage chopping down trees and endangering people's lives. While chopping down the single biggest tree in the woods in a way that spits in the face of gravity, he hears a commotion at the house below. The tree breaks and chases him down, causing him to crash through Granny's window as we saw earlier. Now you might have noticed how I didn't mention any point where his story crosses over with anyone else's. Well, that's because it doesn't. There's this one brief clip of Red riding by, but other than that, he's just by himself until crashing into Granny's. This is what I meant when I said his story was the weakest one. The whole fun of this movie's premise is seeing events repeat in a way that recontextualizes what actually happened. You can't really get that if one of these guys is just doing their own thing. Everyone agrees that Kirk is pretty much useless here, leaving the last suspect of the day, Granny. Red insists they're wasting their time trying to wring out a sweet old lady. That is until the cops make an interesting discovery.
It's true. I'm not like other grannies. I never did like the quilting bees and the bingo parlors. I'd rather live life to the extreme.
It's revealed that who everybody thought was just a nice old lady making baked goods is actually a thrill-seeking adrenaline junkie. She goes on to say that the real reason she didn't want Red coming over was because of a skiing competition at the top of the mountain. Upon her arrival, she meets up with some friends, making me question how well kept her secret is, who tell her to beware of this shady new ski team. Boingo's there too.
Just put to my biggest and cutest fan, Boingo.
Immediately as the competition starts, one of them breaks Granny's skis as the rest start attacking everyone. Eventually, they all single out Granny, and as she fights back, it soon becomes apparent that these guys aren't here to compete. They're here to take Granny out. One of them manages to dangle Granny over a cliff, although for some reason he's the one being interrogated, and he confesses they were hired by the Goody Bandit to get rid of her. The guy realizes he can just push her off, but Granny latches onto the side and quickly makes her way back up. To stop the goons from getting away, she blows up the fucking mountain, starting an avalanche, trapping them, and possibly endangering a bunch of other innocent people she didn't account for, including her granddaughter. Granny launches off the mountain and parachutes back to her house, but not before seeing Red flying by below. That's right, what Red thought was just a vision was actually Granny flying over her for real. Although I guess they finally caved in and reused footage because for some reason her harness is missing. She makes it back only for her parachute to get caught in the ceiling fan, tying her up and trapping her in the closet. Granny wraps up her story, and Red is not happy. She's been making deliveries all day, every day, and Granny's been off living the fun life she's always wanted, and I gotta ask, does anybody really care about this? I don't know, this has always just felt kind of tacked on to me. Like, I get you gotta give your characters some personal stuff to work through, but it's got nothing to do with the situation at hand. I'm pretty sure the people watching this are more interested in the criminal at large than they are seeing these two fight. I'm probably getting too caught up on this, to be honest. I don't really mind this scene, but it never really hit me like I think the film wanted it to. Feeling betrayed by her granny, Red leaves to sulk in the woods, somehow sneaking past the cops who are literally standing right there. You know, come to think of it, I guess you could say the song that plays here, Red is Blue, might count as a musical number. I mean, nobody in this movie actually sings it, but it's clearly trying to refer to what you see on screen.
Because red is blue doesn't make much sense, but red is blue.
I don't know, I'll let you decide if this counts. Back at the house, a mysterious figure sneaks past the cops and steals Red's basket with her granny's recipes still inside. This guy's getting fired for sure. They sneak out and make their way to a nearby cable car, but not without Red noticing them get in. At last, it's time for Flippers to run through everyone's alibi one more time to reveal the Goody Bandit, but not before they notice both Red and her basket missing. For a brief moment, everyone thinks it's Red, and that she just got away with her granny's recipes. Flippers, though, says there's another suspect at play. Someone who all four encountered during their endeavors.
There's someone else, the only one, who was with Red when she fell, who knew a shortcut to Granny's, who fraternizes with evil ski teams, someone who was there when the schnitzel truck was schnitzeled.
What a schnitzel!
Not the bunny!
I knew it. Never trust a bunny.
Never trust a bunny.
Wow, so you mean to tell me that this random bunny who conveniently showed up everywhere for no discernible reason and, come to think of it, quickly forgot about the fact that his friend might have fallen to her death as if to say he doesn't actually care about her well-being is the elusive Goody Bandit? Gee, who would have thought? Well, 6-year-old me didn't, he was an idiot. With Red's basket suddenly turning up missing, they quickly put together that Boingo must have snuck in under their noses. And with reports of a cable car leaving a nearby station, they race down the mountain in the hopes of catching their perp. Although for some reason they don't think of sending two teams in both directions because I don't think anyone said which way they went. Surprise, they should have went with that method as Wolf, Granny, and Kirk see two of the goons from earlier driving up the mountain. Wolf gives Twitchy some coffee to catch up with the police, inadvertently creating this world's equivalent of a particle accelerator. And the three of them head up the mountain to stop Boingo. Cut to an old cable car station where Boingo arrives with one of his goons, only to discover that Red hitched a ride. She tries to take him out only to discover that Boingo is a martial arts master who specializes in middle school smack talk.
You hit like a girl.
Boingo gets the upper hand and we get a villain song where he explains his master plan of wiping out all the competition in the woods to start his own baked goods empire. I wouldn't say it's as good as the goat song from earlier, but I think it's still pretty catchy.
So you won't be a fan of my evil plan, but I'm gonna be top of the woods.
Something that's kind of weird though is that he also plans on drugging his goodies so that more people get addicted to them. I mean, if you're gonna do that, I don't think you would need to steal everyone's recipes. People are gonna go to you first if it means not going through withdrawal. Red is tied up and loaded into a cable car along with a bunch of explosives, just in time for Granny, Wolf, and Kirk to arrive and devise a plan to rescue her, just before they take care of this guy. Kirk dons the guy's clothes while Wolf dresses up as a building inspector to distract Boingo, allowing Granny to sneak by. The jig is up though when Boingo gets a whiff of her old lady sweat. As the three try fighting as goons, Boingo lights the fuse and sends the cable car off. Red manages to untie herself and climbs out onto the roof, where she sees Granny grinding the rail towards her. Together, they drop the cable car in the river below, but they're not out of the woods yet, as Boingo and his goons are trailing right behind them. Luckily, Twitchy was able to catch up with the cops in time for them to set up a blockade down below. Red and Granny do their makeshift glider thing again, quickly evading Boingo, sending both him and his goons into the hands of the police. And with that, the Goody Bandit is no more. In the coming days, Red, Granny, Wolf, and not Kirk, he is dead to us, are gathered together by Nicky Flippers, who offers them jobs at his agency, stopping crimes and making the world a better place. And let me tell ya, I can't wait to see what he has in store for these guys. So there's Hoodwinked for ya. Looking at it again for this video, I guess I can't really say it's perfect. Far from it, actually. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot here to like, but there are some areas where I think this movie falls short. And I'm not just talking about the animation. Something I've been putting off on telling you though is that the film's low budget meant they couldn't afford to animate new scenes after the script was finished. What this means is that they could only put out their first draft for the production. And when you consider this, it's kind of amazing the film turned out as good as it did. Even if this wasn't the case though, it doesn't really take away from everything I like about this movie. Like I said, this whole idea of seeing the same things play out from other people's point of view was just such a cool idea when I was a kid. And I think it's the fact that I saw it as a kid that just made it all the better. I'm not trying to say that Hoodwinked invented this kind of storytelling, but I can't think of many examples of this kind of thing being aimed at such a young audience. As imperfect as this film is, I can't deny the strong impression it made on me when I first saw it all those years ago. It may not look it, but I think this film deserves a strong place in animation history. If you enjoyed the video, then please subscribe, leave a like, check out the channel, and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Take care.